The fluorescent lights of Miller's Market buzzed softly overhead as 8-year-old Emma Rose Patterson pushed the shopping cart alongside her grandmother, Dorothy Patterson. The wheels squeaked rhythmically against the polished linoleum floor, creating a familiar soundtrack to their weekly grocery routine. It was a Thursday afternoon in mid-September, and the small supermarket in Bakersfield, California, was quieter than usual, with only a handful of customers navigating the narrow aisles. Emma hummed softly to herself as they moved through the produce section, her small fingers drumming against the metal cart handle. At just 8 years old, she had inherited her father's musical ear and her mother's determination, though she didn't fully understand the weight of either gift yet. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her worn denim overalls bore the evidence of a day spent playing in the backyard. Grass stains on the knees and dirt smudges on the pockets. "Grandma Dorothy, can we get the strawberries?" Emma asked, pointing to the bright red berries displayed in neat plastic containers. Dorothy Patterson, a woman in her late 60s with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, smiled down at her granddaughter. "Let's see what's on sale, sweetheart. We need to make every dollar count this week." The Patterson family had been stretching their budget thin since Emma's father, Michael Patterson, died in a construction accident 18 months ago. Sarah Patterson, Emma's mother, worked double shifts as a registered nurse at Mercy General Hospital, often leaving Emma in the care of her paternal grandparents. Dorothy and Frank Patterson had welcomed their son's family into their modest 2-bedroom house on Cedar Street without hesitation, transforming their quiet retirement into a bustling household filled with the energy of a growing child. As they moved through the dairy section, Emma's humming grew louder, eventually forming into words. Her voice, clear and surprisingly mature for her age, began to fill the space around them. Looking back on the memory of the dance we shared beneath the stars above, several customers turned their heads, smiles spreading across their faces as they recognized both the song and the little girl who had become something of a local celebrity at Miller's Market. Emma had been singing during their shopping trips for over a year now, and her renditions of classic country songs had become a weekly highlight for the store's regular patrons. "That's our little songbird," whispered Margaret Chen, an elderly woman selecting yogurt from the refrigerated case. She had been shopping at Miller's Market for 30 years and had watched 3 generations of the Patterson family grow up in this neighborhood. Tom Rodriguez, the store manager, emerged from the back office carrying a clipboard. At 45, he had been running Miller's Market for the past decade and had seen countless customers come and go. But Emma's weekly performances never failed to brighten his day. The store had struggled to compete with the larger chain supermarkets that had opened on the outskirts of town, but Emma's presence had become an unexpected draw for customers who appreciated the personal touch of a community gathering place. "There's our star performer," Tom said, approaching Dorothy with a warm smile. "How are you folks doing today?" "We're managing, Tom. Thank you for asking," Dorothy replied, her voice carrying the quiet dignity of someone who had learned to accept help gracefully while maintaining her pride. Emma continued singing, her voice growing stronger as she became more comfortable with her audience. "For a moment, wasn't I the king? If I'd only known how the king would fall." The lyrics seemed to carry extra weight in the context of her young life, though Emma sang them with the innocence of a child who understood melody better than meaning. She had learned the dance by listening to her father's old CD collection, which now sat in a cardboard box in the living room, too precious to pack away, but too painful for her mother to display prominently. Frank Patterson had been the one to introduce his son to country music, and Michael had passed that love down to Emma. On quiet evenings before the accident, Michael would sit on the back porch with his acoustic guitar, teaching Emma the words to classic songs while Sarah finished her nursing school homework. Those moments felt like a lifetime ago now, existing only in the spaces between memory and dreams. As Emma reached the chorus, her voice soared through the supermarket with an emotional resonance that seemed impossible for someone so young. I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance. A small crowd had gathered at the end of aisle 7, drawn by the pure, heartfelt quality of Emma's voice. Among them stood Janet Morrison, a retired music teacher who had taught at Bakersfield Elementary for 35 years. She listened with the trained ear of someone who had heard thousands of children sing, recognizing immediately that Emma possessed something special, not just technical ability, but an innate understanding of how to connect with a song emotionally. "That child has a gift," Janet whispered to her husband Robert, who nodded in agreement. They had been discussing for weeks whether to approach Dorothy about Emma's talent, knowing that proper training could make a significant difference in the girl's development as a performer. Emma finished the song to spontaneous applause from the gathered customers, her cheeks flushing pink with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. She had grown accustomed to the attention her singing attracted, but she still felt surprised each time people stopped what they were doing to listen. "Thank you," she said softly, offering a small curtsy that Dorothy had taught her, a gesture that seemed both old-fashioned and perfectly natural coming from this particular child. As the crowd dispersed and the Pattersons continued their shopping, Dorothy felt the familiar tug of bittersweet pride. Emma's talent reminded her so much of Michael, who had dreamed of pursuing music before practical concerns led him to construction work. She wondered what opportunities might exist for Emma, but the family's financial situation made music lessons seem like an impossible luxury. They moved through the remaining aisles efficiently, Dorothy checking items off her carefully prepared list, while Emma continued to hum softly. In the cereal aisle, they encountered another regular customer, James Wellington, a local businessman who owned 3 restaurants in the area. He had been one of Emma's most enthusiastic supporters, often timing his grocery shopping to coincide with her weekly performances. "Beautiful as always, Emma," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "I hope you don't mind, but I'd like to contribute to your music education fund." He handed Dorothy a folded $20 bill, the same gesture he had made several times over the past few months. Dorothy's instinct was always to refuse such generosity, but she had learned that James took genuine pleasure in supporting Emma's talent, and turning down his gift would disappoint him more than accepting it would compromise her dignity. "Thank you, Mr. Wellington. That's very kind of you," Dorothy said, accepting the money with grace. "Have you given any more thought to getting her some formal training?" James asked, lowering his voice so Emma wouldn't overhear. "I know a few people in the music industry here in Bakersfield. It wouldn't hurt to have her voice evaluated professionally." Dorothy nodded thoughtfully. The suggestion wasn't new. Several people had mentioned it over the past year, but the logistics remained challenging. Between Sarah's work schedule and the family's tight budget, finding time and money for music lessons seemed nearly impossible. As they completed their shopping and moved toward the checkout lanes, Emma began singing again, this time choosing "Friends in Low Places," another Garth Brooks song that had become one of her signature pieces at Miller's Market. Her version was innocent and sweet, lacking the weary wisdom of the original but carrying its own charm through her pure, unaffected delivery. Lisa Park, the cashier working register 3, smiled as she began scanning the Pattersons' items. At 24, she was working her way through community college while supporting her younger brother, and she had developed a special fondness for Emma over the months of weekly encounters. "You get better every week, Emma," Lisa said as she rang up a gallon of milk. "My little brother Tyler loves listening to the videos I take of you singing. He says You're going to be famous someday." Emma giggled, the sound mixing with her ongoing humming as Dorothy counted out exact change from her carefully organized wallet. The total came to $47.83, leaving them with just enough left over for gas to get Sarah to work and back for the remainder of the week. As they prepared to leave, Tom Rodriguez approached them once more, this time carrying a small bouquet of flowers from the store's floral department. "These were marked down for quick sale," he said, handing the flowers to Emma. "I thought you might like them. Consider it payment for the free entertainment." Emma's face lit up with genuine joy as she accepted the flowers, a mix of daisies and carnations that were slightly past their prime, but still beautiful to 8-year-old eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Tom," she said, instinctively offering him another small curtsy. Outside in the parking lot, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the asphalt. Dorothy loaded the groceries into the trunk of her 2008 Honda Civic, while Emma carefully arranged her flowers in the front seat, continuing to hum the dance under her breath. "Grandma, why do people like it when I sing?" Emma asked as they pulled out of the parking lot. Dorothy glanced in the rearview mirror at her granddaughter, searching for the right words to explain something she didn't fully understand herself. "I think it's because you sing from your heart, sweetheart. When people hear you, they can feel that you really mean every word, even if you don't understand all the words yet." Emma nodded solemnly, as if this explanation made perfect sense to her 8-year-old logic. "Daddy used to say that music was like telling stories, but with feelings instead of just words," Emma said, her voice taking on the serious tone she used when talking about her father. "Your daddy was a smart man," Dorothy replied, her throat tightening slightly. "He would be so proud of you." As they drove through the familiar neighborhoods toward home, neither Emma nor Dorothy could have imagined that their next visit to Miller's Market would be anything other than routine. They had no way of knowing that Emma's weekly performance was about to attract an audience member who would change the trajectory of their lives in ways they couldn't begin to fathom. The late September air carried the first hints of autumn, and the setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed almost too perfect to be real. In the distance, the mountains that surrounded Bakersfield stood like silent sentinels, witnesses to countless human stories of struggle and hope, loss, and unexpected grace. Emma fell asleep in the back seat during the short drive home, her small hand still clutching the slightly wilted flowers from Tom Rodriguez, her lips moving silently as she continued to sing in her dreams. The following Thursday arrived with an unusual buzz of activity in downtown Bakersfield. Word had spread through the small community that a famous country music star was scheduled to make an unscheduled stop in town, though details remained vague and contradictory. Some claimed it was for a surprise concert. Others insisted it was merely a brief rest stop during a cross-country tour. What no one knew was that Garth Brooks, traveling with a small entourage between Los Angeles and Nashville, had experienced tour bus trouble just outside the city limits. Brooks and his team had been forced to stop for emergency repairs at Martinez Auto Shop on Union Avenue, just 3 blocks from Miller's Market. While his crew worked on the mechanical issues, Brooks had decided to stretch his legs and grab some snacks for the road, choosing the small neighborhood supermarket over the larger chain stores for its authentic community atmosphere. Emma Rose Patterson had no knowledge of these developments as she climbed into her grandmother's Honda Civic after school. Her day at Bakersfield Elementary had been typical: math worksheets, a spelling test she was confident she had aced, and a playground dispute over swings that had been resolved through the diplomatic intervention of Mrs. Rodriguez, the playground supervisor. "How was school today, sweetheart?" Dorothy asked as Emma fastened her seatbelt. "Good. Mrs. Hamilton said my book report on Charlotte's Web was one of the best in the class," Emma replied, her face glowing with pride. And Tommy Martinez asked if I wanted to be in the school talent show next month. Dorothy's eyebrows raised with interest. What did you tell him? I said I'd have to ask Mama, and you and Grandpa Frank, Emma answered diplomatically. But I really want to do it. I could sing the dance, or maybe that new song by Carrie Underwood that plays on the radio. As they drove toward Miller's Market for their weekly shopping trip, Dorothy found herself thinking about Emma's growing confidence as a performer. The shy little girl who had once hidden behind her father's legs when strangers spoke to her had gradually transformed into a poised young performer who genuinely enjoyed sharing her gift with others. The parking lot at Miller's Market was busier than usual for a Thursday afternoon, with several unfamiliar vehicles parked near the entrance. Dorothy noticed a large, sleek tour bus idling at the far end of the lot, its tinted windows and professional detailing suggesting it belonged to someone important. Looks like we're not the only ones doing some shopping today, Dorothy observed as she found a parking space. Inside the store, there was an unusual energy in the air. Customers moved through the aisles with an anticipatory excitement. Conversations conducted in hushed, excited tones. Tom Rodriguez stood near the customer service counter, speaking in low voices with two men in dark suits who had the unmistakable bearing of professional security personnel. I wonder what's going on, Dorothy murmured to herself as she retrieved a shopping cart. Emma seemed oblivious to the unusual atmosphere, immediately beginning her customary humming as they entered the produce section. Today she had chosen Unanswered Prayers, another Garth Brooks song that had become part of her regular repertoire, though she understood only the melody and basic emotional content of the lyrics. As they moved through the store, Dorothy noticed several customers with their phones out, apparently recording videos or taking pictures of something near the back of the store. The behavior struck her as odd. Miller's Market wasn't typically the kind of place that attracted social media attention. In aisle 5, they encountered Janet Morrison, the retired music teacher who had become one of Emma's most consistent supporters. "Dorothy!" Janet exclaimed, her voice slightly breathless with excitement. "You'll never guess what's happening. There's a very famous country singer in the store right now. I can't say who, but..." She leaned closer and whispered, "It's someone Emma would definitely recognize." Dorothy felt a flutter of nervousness. While she was proud of Emma's talent, she had always been careful to ensure that her granddaughter's performances remained spontaneous and pressure-free. The presence of a professional musician, especially one famous enough to generate this level of excitement, introduced variables she couldn't control. "Emma hasn't noticed anything unusual yet," Dorothy said quietly. "Maybe we should just do our shopping quietly today." But Emma's natural instincts as a performer seemed to be kicking in despite her grandmother's concerns. As they moved into aisle 7, the same aisle where she typically drew her largest audiences, her humming grew stronger and more confident. "Just because she doesn't answer doesn't mean she don't care," Emma sang, her clear, sweet voice beginning to carry through the store. "Sometimes I understand her, and sometimes I don't." Near the end of the aisle, standing next to a display of pasta sauce and apparently comparing labels, was a tall man in jeans, boots, and a simple black t-shirt. He wore a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, and his posture suggested someone trying to maintain a low profile while going about ordinary business. Emma continued singing, unaware that she had attracted the attention of the man near the pasta display. Some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. The man slowly turned toward the sound of her voice, and Dorothy felt her heart skip a beat as she recognized the distinctive profile and unmistakable presence of Garth Brooks. Even attempting to remain incognito, there was something about his bearing and the way he moved that made him instantly recognizable to anyone familiar with his public persona. Brooks stood completely still, listening to Emma's pure, unaffected rendition of his song. His expression was one of complete absorption, the look of a professional musician recognizing something special when he heard it. He had heard thousands of covers of his songs over the years, performed by everyone from aspiring professionals to talented amateurs. But there was something about this child's voice that stopped him in his tracks. Emma reached the final chorus, her voice growing stronger as she lost herself in the emotional content of the song. Some of God's greatest gifts are unanswered prayers. As the final notes faded, Brooks began to applaud slowly, deliberately. The sound drew the attention of other customers in the area who realized that something significant was happening. Emma looked up, surprised to find herself the focus of attention from a stranger. She offered her customary small curtsy, but something about the man's intense focus made her feel slightly self-conscious. "That was beautiful," Brooks said, his voice warm and genuine. "You've got a real gift there, young lady." Dorothy stepped closer to Emma, her protective instincts activated by the unusual circumstances. "Thank you," she said politely. "Emma loves to sing." Brooks knelt down to Emma's eye level, removing his baseball cap to reveal his familiar face. "My name is Garth. What's your name?" Emma's eyes widened as recognition dawned. She had seen this face on the CD covers in her father's collection, had heard this voice singing the songs she had learned by heart. You're Garth Brooks," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am," he confirmed with a gentle smile. "And you sing my songs better than I do." The compliment seemed to restore Emma's confidence. "My daddy taught me that song," she said proudly. "He taught me lots of your songs. He said you were the best country singer in the whole world." Brooks felt a tightness in his chest at the past tense reference to her father. "Your daddy sounds like a man with excellent taste in music," he said carefully. "Is he here with you today?" "My daddy died in an accident," Emma replied with the matter-of-fact directness the children often used to discuss difficult topics. "But he taught me to sing before he died, and Grandma Dorothy says he would be proud of me." Dorothy placed a protective hand on Emma's shoulder, both proud of her granddaughter's composure and concerned about sharing personal information with a stranger, famous or otherwise. "I'm Dorothy Patterson," she said, extending her hand to Brooks. "This is my granddaughter, Emma Rose Patterson." Brooks stood and shook Dorothy's hand with genuine warmth. "It's an honor to meet you both. I have to tell you, Emma, in all my years of performing, I've rarely heard anyone sing with as much heart as you do." By now, a small crowd had gathered at a respectful distance, customers and employees alike recognizing that they were witnessing something special. Tom Rodriguez had positioned himself near the end of the aisle, ensuring that the interaction remained private, while being prepared to intervene if the situation became overwhelming. "Would you mind singing another song?" Brooks asked Emma. "Maybe something we could sing together?" Emma's face lit up with an excitement that seemed to illuminate her entire being. "Could we sing The Dance? That was Daddy's favorite song." "I'd be honored," Brooks replied. What happened next would be remembered by everyone present for the rest of their lives. Brooks began the opening lines of The Dance, his famous voice filling the supermarket with its rich, familiar tone. When Emma joined in for the second verse, their voices blended in a way that seemed almost magical. The seasoned professional and the 8-year-old with a gift, united in a moment of pure musical connection. "Looking back on the memory of the dance we shared beneath the stars above," they sang together. Emma's clear, sweet voice providing a perfect counterpoint to Brooks's deeper, more mature sound. Customers throughout the store had stopped what they were doing, drawn by the unmistakable sound of something extraordinary happening in aisle 7. Phones emerged from pockets and purses as people began recording, understanding instinctively that they were witnessing a once-in-a-lifetime moment. As they reached the chorus, Emma's confidence soared. She was singing with her idol, the man whose voice had provided the soundtrack to some of her most precious memories with her father. The moment felt both surreal and completely natural, as if this encounter had been destined to happen. "I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance," they concluded together, their final notes hanging in the air like a blessing. The applause that followed was thunderous, filling every corner of Miller's Market with appreciation for what they had just witnessed. Brooks wrapped Emma in a gentle hug, and Dorothy felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she realized that her granddaughter was experiencing something that would define her relationship with music for the rest of her life. "Emma," Brooks said, still kneeling at her level, "I want you to know that you have something very special. Your daddy was right to teach you to sing, and he would be incredibly proud of you right now." Emma beamed with happiness, but her next words surprised everyone. "Mr. Garth, would you like to come to dinner at our house? Grandma Dorothy makes the best fried chicken in Bakersfield, and Grandpa Frank would really like to meet you. He's the one who taught Daddy to love country music." Dorothy felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment at her granddaughter's bold invitation, but Brooks's face broke into a genuine smile. "You know what, Emma? I think I'd like that very much. But let me ask your grandmother if that's okay first." He looked up at Dorothy with a questioning expression that somehow made the surreal situation feel completely normal. "We would be honored to have you," Dorothy heard herself saying, though part of her couldn't believe the words were coming out of her mouth. "It's nothing fancy, just simple home cooking." "That sounds perfect," Brooks replied. "I'll just need to let my crew know there's been a change of plans." As Brooks stepped away to speak with his security team, Dorothy found herself in a daze. 30 minutes ago, she had been planning a routine shopping trip and a quiet evening at home. Now she was preparing to host one of the most famous musicians in the world for dinner. Emma, meanwhile, seemed to be taking the entire situation in stride, as if encountering country music superstars in the pasta aisle was a perfectly normal part of her weekly routine. "Grandma," she said quietly, "I think Daddy would be happy about today." Dorothy pulled her granddaughter close, feeling the truth of those words deep in her heart. "I think you're absolutely right, sweetheart." The rest of their shopping trip passed in a blur of excitement and surreal normalcy, with Brooks helping them select items for dinner while maintaining casual conversation about music, family, and the simple pleasures of small-town life. By the time they reached the checkout counter, word had spread throughout Bakersfield that something extraordinary was happening at Miller's Market, and the story of Emma Rose Patterson was about to become much bigger than anyone could have imagined. The Patterson house on Cedar Street had never felt smaller than it did at 4:30 on that Thursday afternoon. Dorothy stood in her modest kitchen, staring at the ingredients she had hastily purchased for an impromptu dinner that would host one of the most famous musicians in the world. The surreal nature of the situation hadn't fully sunk in yet, but the practical concerns of hospitality were keeping her grounded in familiar routines. "Frank," she called to her husband, who was in the living room watching the local news. "We need to clean up a bit. We're having company for dinner." Frank Patterson, a 71-year-old retired veteran with silver hair and weathered hands, looked up from his recliner with mild curiosity. At his age, unexpected dinner guests were usually limited to neighbors or Sarah's colleagues from the hospital. "Who's coming over?" he asked, reaching for the remote to mute the television. "Garth Brooks," Dorothy replied, trying to keep her voice casual as she began pulling ingredients from grocery bags. Frank's hand froze halfway to the remote control. "Come again?" Emma bounced into the living room, her school backpack forgotten on the floor, her face glowing with excitement. "Grandpa Frank, I sang with Garth Brooks at the store, and now he's coming for dinner. He said I sing really good, and he wants to meet you because you taught Daddy about country music." Frank looked between his granddaughter and his wife, searching their faces for some indication that this was an elaborate joke. Finding only genuine excitement and nervous energy, he slowly rose from his chair. "Dorothy, please tell me you're not pulling my leg here." "I'm as shocked as you are," Dorothy admitted, opening the refrigerator to take inventory of their available ingredients. "He should be here around 6. His bus is still being repaired, and his crew is handling some business in town." The next 90 minutes passed in a whirlwind of activity that transformed the modest Patterson household. Frank, despite his initial disbelief, threw himself into preparation with military precision, straightening furniture, organizing his collection of country music memorabilia, and even polishing his dress boots for the occasion. Emma appointed herself as the official greeter and spent her time practicing what she would say when their famous guest arrived. She changed clothes 3 times before settling on her best dress, a simple blue outfit with white flowers that her mother had bought for church occasions. Dorothy worked in the kitchen with focused efficiency, preparing her grandmother's recipe for fried chicken, homemade mashed potatoes, green beans from their small backyard garden, and buttermilk biscuits that had been a family specialty for 3 generations. The familiar rhythms of cooking helped calm her nerves, while giving her something productive to focus on. At 5:15, Sarah Patterson arrived home from her shift at Mercy General Hospital, looking exhausted but relieved to be finished with another long day. She found her family in various states of excited preparation and assumed they were hosting one of Emma's school friends and parents. "Something smells wonderful," Sarah said, hanging her nurse's uniform jacket on the coat rack by the front door. "Are we having company?" "Mama!" Emma exclaimed, rushing to greet her mother. "Garth Brooks is coming to dinner. I sang with him at the store and he said I was really good, and Grandma invited him over." Sarah looked at her daughter's excited face, then at her mother-in-law's bustling activity in the kitchen, searching for context clues that would help her understand what was obviously an elaborate game of pretend. "That's wonderful, sweetie," Sarah said diplomatically. "Why don't you go wash your hands before our guest arrives?" Dorothy emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, and met Sarah's questioning gaze with the expression of barely contained amazement. "Sarah, I know this sounds impossible, but Emma's telling the truth. Garth Brooks is coming to dinner in about 40 minutes. Sarah Patterson had spent the last 2 years rebuilding her life around practical concerns and realistic expectations. As a single mother working long hours to support her family, she had learned to be skeptical of anything that seemed too good to be true. But looking at her mother-in-law's face, she recognized the same expression Dorothy had worn on the day Emma was born, a mixture of disbelief and wonder that couldn't be faked. "How did this happen?" Sarah asked, sinking into one of the kitchen chairs. Dorothy quickly recounted the events at Miller's Market, describing Brooks's reaction to Emma's singing and the spontaneous duet that had captivated everyone in the store. As she spoke, Sarah's expression shifted from skepticism to amazement, to a growing concern about what this might mean for their family's privacy. "People were recording with their phones," Dorothy continued. "I think this might be bigger than just a nice evening with a famous musician." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. As a healthcare professional, she understood the importance of maintaining boundaries and protecting Emma from situations that might become overwhelming. But she also recognized that this could be an extraordinary opportunity for her daughter's musical development. "How is Emma handling all this?" Sarah asked. "Like it's the most natural thing in the world," Dorothy replied with a smile. "She invited him to dinner, as if she were asking a classmate to stay for lunch." At exactly 6 o'clock, a knock at the front door sent a wave of nervous energy through the Patterson household. Emma ran to answer it, but Frank gently intercepted her, understanding the importance of maintaining some adult supervision over the situation. Garth Brooks stood on their small front porch, looking remarkably normal in jeans and a button-down shirt, carrying a bouquet of flowers and a small gift bag. Behind him, at a respectful distance, stood one of his security personnel, who had insisted on accompanying him despite Brooks's preference for a completely informal visit. "Mr. Patterson," Brooks said, extending his hand to Frank. "Thank you for welcoming me into your home. I'm Garth Brooks." "I know who you are, son," Frank replied, shaking hands with a grip that conveyed both respect and the quiet strength of a man who had worked with his hands his entire life. "I've been listening to your music for 30 years. Please, come in." As Brooks entered the modest living room, his eyes immediately went to the walls, which were decorated with family photographs and Frank's carefully maintained collection of country music memorabilia. Albums, concert posters, and photographs spanning decades of country music history created a timeline of American musical culture. "This is incredible," Brooks said, examining a framed photograph of Frank as a young soldier, standing next to a group of musicians during his service in Vietnam. "You were in a military band?" "Just played guitar around the campfire, mostly," Frank replied modestly. "But music was how we kept our spirits up during the tough times. I brought that love home with me and passed it down to my son." Emma appeared at Brooks's elbow, having changed into her best dress, and clearly prepared to serve as hostess for the evening. "Mr. Garth, these are pictures of my daddy," she said, pointing to several photographs on the mantelpiece. "That's him playing guitar, and that's him and Mama at their wedding, and that's him holding me when I was a baby." Brooks knelt down to examine the photographs Emma was indicating, seeing a young man with kind eyes and calloused hands holding a guitar in several of the images. In the wedding photo, Michael Patterson looked proud and happy, his arm around a younger Sarah who was glowing with joy. "He looks like he was a good man," Brooks said softly. "He was the best daddy in the whole world," Emma replied with complete conviction. "He taught me to sing, and he said that music was how people could talk to each other even when they were far apart." Sarah emerged from the kitchen, having changed out of her scrubs into a simple sweater and jeans. Despite her exhaustion from a 12-hour shift, she had taken a few minutes to freshen up and prepare herself to meet their unexpected guest. "Mr. Brooks," she said, extending her hand, "I'm Sarah Patterson, Emma's mother. Thank you for being so kind to her today." "Please, call me Garth," he replied, shaking her hand warmly. "And I should be thanking you and your family for raising such a remarkable little girl. Emma has a truly special gift." Dorothy called them to dinner, and they gathered around the small dining room table that had been expanded with folding chairs to accommodate their party of 5, plus the security guard, who had been reluctantly convinced to join them rather than wait outside. The meal began with Frank saying grace, a tradition that felt both formal and intimate given their unusual circumstances. As they shared the simple but delicious meal Dorothy had prepared, the conversation flowed naturally between music, family stories, and the small details of daily life in Bakersfield. Brooks seemed genuinely interested in learning about their family history, asking Frank about his military service, his work as a mechanic after returning from Vietnam, and how he had fostered his son's love of country music. Frank, in turn, shared stories about taking young Michael to local concerts and teaching him to play guitar, creating a foundation for the musical legacy that lived on in Emma. Michael had real talent, Frank said, his voice carrying the weight of memories and missed opportunities. He could have pursued music professionally, but he chose to be practical. He wanted to provide for his family. "That's the mark of a good man," Brooks replied, and it sounds like he found a way to keep music in his life through Emma. As dinner progressed, Emma's initial nervousness gave way to her natural confidence. She regaled Brooks with stories about her performances at Miller's Market, her friends at school, and her dreams of maybe someday singing on the radio like her favorite artists. "Do you think I could be a real singer someday?" Emma asked during dessert, her question carrying the sincere curiosity of a child who was just beginning to understand the possibilities that might lie ahead. "Emma," Brooks said seriously, "you already are a real singer. The question isn't whether you have enough talent, you absolutely do. The question is whether you want to put in the work to develop that talent and share it with the world." He turned to Sarah and Dorothy, recognizing that any serious discussion about Emma's future would need to involve the adults who were responsible for her welfare. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but Emma has something special. With the right training and support, she could have a real future in music if that's what she chooses." Sarah felt a familiar mix of hope and concern. "We've thought about music lessons, but with everything else..." She trailed off, not wanting to discuss their financial limitations in front of their guest. "I understand," Brooks said gently, "but there are people who would consider it an investment in something truly special. I'd like to help, if you'll let me." The offer hung in the air like a gift too precious to accept, yet too valuable to refuse. Sarah looked around the table at her family's faces, Dorothy's careful hope, Frank's quiet pride, and Emma's innocent expectation that good things could simply happen, because they should. "That's incredibly generous," Sarah said carefully, "but we couldn't possibly accept." "Let me finish," Brooks interrupted gently. "I'm not talking about charity. I'm talking about opportunity. Emma has a gift that deserves to be nurtured, and I have resources that aren't being used. It would be an honor to help connect her with the right teachers and opportunities." Frank leaned back in his chair, studying Brooks with the measuring gaze of a man who had learned to read people's intentions through decades of experience. "What exactly are you proposing?" Frank asked. "Music lessons, for starters. Voice coaching. Maybe some piano or guitar instruction. There's a woman named Rebecca Martinez who teaches at the Bakersfield Community Music Center. She's one of the best vocal instructors on the West Coast. I'd like to arrange for Emma to work with her." Emma's eyes grew wide. "Real music lessons? Like the kids on TV?" "Better than the kids on TV," Brooks replied with a smile. "Because you already have something they're trying to learn, the ability to connect with a song emotionally." As the evening progressed, they moved to the living room where Frank pulled out his old acoustic guitar, the same instrument he had used to teach Michael, and which Michael had played for Emma during those precious evenings before his death. "This guitar has been in our family for 40 years, Frank said, running his weathered fingers over the worn wood. "Michael played it, and now Emma's learning on it." Brooks accepted the instrument reverently, understanding immediately that he was holding something precious beyond its monetary value. He strummed a few chords, testing the tone and finding it surprisingly good despite its age. "Would you mind if I played something?" he asked. The next hour was filled with an impromptu concert that none of them would ever forget. Brooks played several of his hit songs, inviting Emma to sing along whenever she knew the words. Frank joined in with his deep bass voice on songs he remembered from his youth, while Dorothy and Sarah provided an appreciative audience. But the most magical moment came when Brooks handed the guitar back to Frank and asked him to play something he had taught his son. Frank's fingers found the familiar chords to "Amazing Grace," a song that had provided comfort during the darkest moments after Michael's death. His voice, weathered by age but still strong, filled the small living room with the timeless melody. Emma joined in unconsciously, her pure soprano creating a haunting harmony with her grandfather's bass. Brooks listened in reverent silence, understanding that he was witnessing something sacred, the passing of musical tradition from one generation to the next, carried forward through love and loss and the healing power of song. When the last notes faded, there were tears in everyone's eyes. The moment felt like a benediction, a blessing on Emma's musical journey and a celebration of the family bonds that had sustained the Pattersons through their most difficult times. "That was beautiful," Brooks said quietly. "Michael's legacy lives on in both of you." As the evening drew to a close, Brooks pulled out the gift bag he had brought with him. Inside was a child-sized acoustic guitar, professionally crafted but sized perfectly for Emma's small hands. "Every serious musician needs their own instrument," he explained, as Emma stared at the guitar in wonder. "This one is yours, Emma. I hope you'll think of tonight whenever you play it." Emma's response was immediate and heartfelt. She threw her arms around Brooks in a hug that conveyed more gratitude than words could express. "Thank you, Mr. Garth," she whispered. "This is the best day ever." But Brooks wasn't finished. He turned to Sarah with a serious expression. "I meant what I said about the music lessons. I'd like to set up a scholarship fund for Emma's musical education. No strings attached, no publicity requirements, just an investment in a remarkable young talent." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the generosity being offered to her family. 2 years of struggle had taught her to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true, but Brooks's sincerity was unmistakable. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "Say yes," Dorothy interjected quietly. "Sometimes gifts come into our lives when we need them most. I think Michael would want us to say yes." As Brooks prepared to leave, Emma had one final request. "Mr. Garth, will you come back and visit us again? Maybe we could sing more songs together?" "I'd like that very much," Brooks replied. "And I hope someday I'll get to watch you perform on a big stage, sharing your gift with the whole world." Outside, the September evening had turned crisp and clear, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Brooks's bus was waiting at the curb, repaired and ready to continue their journey to Nashville. As the Patterson family stood on their front porch, watching one of the world's most famous musicians climb into his tour bus, the events of the day still felt surreal. But Emma's new guitar was real, and the promise of music lessons was real, and the memory of singing the dance with her idol would remain vivid for the rest of her life. "Grandma," Emma said, as they watched the bus disappear down Cedar Street, "do you think this really happened? Or am I dreaming?" Dorothy pulled her granddaughter close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and feeling the solid warmth of her small body. "It really happened, sweetheart. Sometimes life surprises us with gifts we never expected." As they went back inside, Frank carefully placed Emma's new guitar in the corner of the living room where it would be safe but visible, a daily reminder of an extraordinary evening when dreams and reality had intersected in the most beautiful way possible. Sarah tucked Emma into bed that night, listening to her daughter recount every detail of the evening, her excitement still bubbling over despite her obvious exhaustion. "Mama," Emma said as Sarah turned off the bedside lamp, "I think Daddy was watching tonight. I could feel him smiling when Mr. Garth and I sang together." Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead, her heart full of gratitude for the unexpected blessing that had entered their lives. "I think you're right, baby. I think Daddy was very proud of you tonight." As Emma drifted off to sleep, still clutching the pick that Brooks had given her from his own guitar, Sarah stood in the doorway, thinking about the future that was beginning to unfold for her talented daughter. The road ahead would still have challenges, but tonight had shown them that sometimes, when you least expect it, the world opens up to reveal possibilities you never knew existed. 3 weeks after Garth Brooks's visit, Emma Rose Patterson's life had taken on a rhythm that felt both familiar and completely transformed. The story of her duet with the country music superstar had spread far beyond Bakersfield, with cell phone videos from Miller's Market going viral on social media platforms and news outlets across the country, picking up the heartwarming tale of the 8-year-old with the angelic voice. But for Emma, the most exciting change was her twice-weekly visits to the Bakersfield Community Music Center, where she worked with Rebecca Martinez, the vocal instructor Brooks had recommended. Rebecca, an accomplished musician in her own right, who had performed with several well-known artists before transitioning to teaching, had immediately recognized Emma's exceptional natural ability. "Emma, remember to breathe from your diaphragm," Rebecca instructed during their Tuesday afternoon lesson. "Your voice is like a musical instrument, and proper breathing is how you control it." Emma nodded seriously, placing her small hand on her stomach, as Rebecca had taught her, feeling the expansion and contraction that indicated proper breathing technique. At 8 years old, she was absorbing technical concepts that many adult students struggled to master, but she approached each lesson with the focused attention of someone who genuinely loved learning about music. The Music Center occupied a converted Victorian house on 19th Street. Its rooms filled with the sounds of various instruments and voices as students of all ages pursued their musical education. Emma had quickly become a favorite among both the instructors and other students, her enthusiasm infectious, and her progress remarkable. "Let's try Amazing Grace again," Rebecca suggested, settling at the piano bench. "This time, focus on the emotional story you're telling. Think about what the words mean to you." Emma closed her eyes and began to sing, her voice filling the small practice room with a purity that never failed to give Rebecca chills. But beyond the technical perfection, there was an emotional depth that seemed impossible for someone so young, an understanding of loss and hope that came from lived experience rather than mere instruction. "Beautiful," Rebecca said as the final notes faded. "You're developing real control over your voice, Emma. Your grandfather would be proud of how hard you're working." The mention of Frank brought a smile to Emma's face. He had insisted on driving her to every lesson, sitting in the waiting area with a book or newspaper while she worked with Rebecca. For Frank, these visits represented the fulfillment of dreams he had harbored for his son, the opportunity to see musical talent properly nurtured and developed. "Rebecca," Emma said as they concluded the lesson, "Mr. Garth sent me a letter yesterday. Would you like to read it?" Rebecca's eyebrows raised with interest. Since Brooks's visit, she had been curious about his continued involvement in Emma's musical development. But she had been careful not to pry into the family's private communications. Emma pulled a folded letter from her backpack, the expensive stationery bearing the letterhead of Brooks's management company. Rebecca read with growing amazement as Brooks described his plans to arrange for Emma to attend a summer music camp in Nashville, pending her family's approval and her continued progress with her lessons. "This is incredible, Emma," Rebecca said, handing the letter back carefully. "A summer program in Nashville would expose you to some of the best young musicians in the country." "Mama says we have to think about it carefully," Emma replied, echoing the cautious optimism that had become her family's approach to the unexpected opportunities flowing from her chance encounter with Brooks. "But I really want to go. I want to learn everything I can about music." Meanwhile, across town at Mercy General Hospital, Sarah Patterson was finishing her shift in the pediatric ward, her mind occupied with the complex decisions her family was facing. The scholarship fund Brooks had established was generous enough to cover not only Emma's current lessons, but also potential future opportunities, including the Nashville summer program he had proposed. But Sarah had learned to be cautious about changes that seemed too dramatic, too fast. Emma was still just 8 years old, and Sarah wanted to ensure that any decisions they made served Emma's long-term well-being, rather than simply chasing exciting opportunities. "Sarah, you look like you're carrying the weight of the world," observed Dr. Jennifer Walsh, Sarah's supervisor and friend, as they completed their shift documentation. "Just thinking about Emma," Sarah replied, grateful for Jennifer's friendship and perspective. "This whole thing with Garth Brooks has opened up incredible opportunities, but I want to make sure we're making the right choices for her." Jennifer, a mother of 3 who had navigated her own children's various talents and interests, understood Sarah's concerns. "What does Emma want?" Jennifer asked. "She wants to pursue music with everything she has," Sarah answered without hesitation. "She practices every day. She absorbs everything Rebecca teaches her, and she talks constantly about wanting to share her music with more people." "Then it sounds like you have your answer," Jennifer said gently. "The question isn't whether Emma has the talent or the desire. The question is whether you trust the people who are offering to help her develop that talent." That evening, the Patterson family gathered in their living room for one of their regular discussions about Emma's future. It had become a family tradition to talk through major decisions together, ensuring that everyone's concerns and opinions were heard and considered. Emma sat cross-legged on the floor, strumming her new guitar and practicing the chords Rebecca had taught her. The instrument had quickly become her most prized possession, and she carried it with her throughout the house, finding excuses to practice whenever possible. "Tell us about your lesson today, sweetheart," Dorothy encouraged, settling into her favorite chair with her knitting. "Rebecca says I'm ready to start learning harmony," Emma announced proudly. "And she wants me to start writing my own songs. She says the best singers tell their own stories." Frank looked up from the newspaper he had been reading, his interest clearly piqued. "Writing songs, huh? That's serious business, Emma. Songs come from experiences and feelings. What would you want to write about?" Emma considered the question seriously, her fingers continuing to move across the guitar strings as she thought. "I want to write a song about Daddy," she said finally, "about how he taught me music and how he's still with us, even though we can't see him. Rebecca says that's called inspiration." Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotion. Emma's ability to process her father's death through music had been one of the most healing aspects of her musical development, providing an outlet for feelings that were sometimes too complex for words alone. "I think that's a beautiful idea," Sarah said softly. "Your daddy would love to know that his music lessons are helping you create something new." The conversation turned to the Nashville opportunity, with each family member sharing their thoughts and concerns. Frank was enthusiastic about the chance for Emma to learn from professional instructors, while Dorothy worried about sending an 8-year-old so far from home. Sarah found herself caught between her desire to support Emma's dreams and her instinct to protect her daughter from experiences that might be overwhelming. "What if we visited first?" Emma suggested, with the practical problem-solving approach that often surprised the adults in her life. "Maybe we could go see the music camp before deciding if I want to go there this summer?" The suggestion was met with enthusiastic approval from everyone. A visit would allow them to evaluate the program firsthand, while giving Emma a chance to experience Nashville's music scene and determine whether she was ready for such an intensive program. Over the following days, Sarah contacted Brooks's management team to arrange a spring visit to Nashville. The response was immediate and positive, with offers to coordinate tours of several music education facilities and arrange meetings with instructors who specialized in working with young performers. But the most exciting development came the following week, when Rebecca approached the family with a different kind of opportunity. "There's a regional youth music competition coming up in Sacramento next month," Rebecca explained during one of Emma's lessons. "It's designed for young singers between the ages of 8 and 16, and I think Emma would benefit from the experience of performing for judges and competing with other talented musicians." Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. "A real competition? With other kids who sing?" "Exactly," Rebecca confirmed. "It would be good preparation for more advanced opportunities, and it would give you a chance to see how your skills compare to other young performers." The family discussed the competition over dinner that evening, weighing the potential benefits against their concerns about putting Emma in a high-pressure, competitive environment. "Competitions can be stressful," Sarah observed. "I don't want Emma to feel like her worth is determined by winning or losing." "But they can also be motivating," Frank countered. "Emma's been performing for friendly audiences who already love her. It might be good for her to sing for people who don't know her, who will judge her purely on her talent." Emma listened to the adult discussion with the serious attention she always brought to conversations about her music. Finally, she raised her hand as if she were in school asking for permission to speak. "I want to try the competition," she announced. "Even if I don't win, I want to see what other kids my age can do. Maybe I'll learn something new." Her mature approach to the opportunity convinced the adults that she was ready for the challenge. Rebecca began preparing Emma for the competition, selecting songs that would showcase her vocal range and emotional maturity while remaining appropriate for her age. The preparations became a family effort, with Dorothy helping Emma choose an appropriate dress for the performance, Frank working with her on stage presence and confidence, and Sarah ensuring that Emma understood that their love and pride in her wasn't dependent on the competition results. As Emma practiced the dance in preparation for her competition performance, she found herself thinking about her father more frequently. The song had become her signature piece, but it also served as a connection to the memories and lessons that continued to guide her musical development. "Daddy," she whispered one evening as she practiced alone in her room, "I hope you can see me singing. I'm using everything you taught me, just like you said I should." In the quiet of her small bedroom, surrounded by family photographs and the guitar that had become her constant companion, Emma felt a sense of purpose that seemed far beyond her 8 years. She was no longer just the little girl who sang in the supermarket. She was becoming a real musician, with goals and dreams and the skills to pursue them. The road ahead would bring new challenges and opportunities, but Emma faced them with the confidence that came from knowing she was supported by family, guided by talented instructors, and blessed with a gift that could bring joy to others. Her journey was just beginning, but the foundation was strong, built on love, loss, hope, and the transformative power of music. The Sacramento Youth Music Competition took place on a crisp Saturday morning in November, in the elegant auditorium of the Community Center for the Arts. Emma Rose Patterson stood in the wings, watching other young performers take the stage, her new guitar case at her feet, and her competition number, 47, pinned to her navy blue dress. At 8 years old, she was among the youngest competitors in her age division, but her weeks of preparation with Rebecca Martinez had given her a confidence that radiated from her small frame. The past 2 months had been a whirlwind of intensive practice, technical refinement, and emotional preparation for this moment. "Remember what we practiced," Rebecca whispered, kneeling beside Emma as they waited for her turn. "Breathe from your diaphragm, connect with the story of the song, and trust your instincts. You belong here." Emma nodded, her hands steady as she tuned her guitar one final time. The competition had drawn over 60 young performers from across California, Nevada, and Arizona, representing some of the most talented young musicians in the region. But Emma had learned to focus on her own performance rather than comparing herself to others. In the audience, the Patterson family occupied seats in the third row, close enough to provide moral support, but far enough back to avoid adding pressure to Emma's performance. Sarah sat between Dorothy and Frank, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, as she watched her daughter prepare for the biggest musical challenge of her young life. "She looks so calm," Dorothy observed, marveling at Emma's composure. "She's been ready for this for weeks," Frank replied, his voice filled with quiet pride. "That girl has the heart of a performer." The competition had been organized into several categories, with Emma competing in the traditional country division for performers aged 8 to 12. She had chosen to perform The Dance, the song that had become her signature piece, and which held special meaning for her family's musical journey. Competitor number 47, Emma Rose Patterson from Bakersfield, announced the MC, a local radio personality who had been hosting youth music competitions for over a decade. Emma walked onto the stage with the purposeful stride Rebecca had taught her, acknowledging the audience with a slight nod, before settling onto the stool that had been positioned center stage. The auditorium, which seated nearly 400 people, felt vast compared to the intimate spaces where she usually performed. But Emma found that the size actually helped her focus. She adjusted her guitar and looked out at the audience, her eyes finding her family's encouraging faces in the sea of spectators. Taking a deep breath, she began the opening chords of The Dance, her fingers moving across the strings with the precision that had come from hours of practice. "Looking back on the memory of the dance we shared beneath the stars above," Emma sang, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium without amplification. The acoustic environment showcased the purity and control she had developed under Rebecca's guidance, while the emotional depth of her interpretation demonstrated the natural gift that had first caught Garth Brooks's attention. In the judges section, 3 music industry professionals, a vocal instructor from Los Angeles, a recording engineer with decades of experience, and a former Nashville songwriter, listened with growing amazement. They had heard dozens of young performers that morning, many with impressive technical skills. But Emma's performance stood out for its emotional authenticity and musical maturity. As Emma reached the chorus, her voice soared with a confidence that filled every corner of the auditorium. "I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance." The lyrics, which spoke of accepting life's sorrows as the price of experiencing its joys, carried special resonance when delivered by a child who had experienced real loss, but chosen to embrace hope. Emma's interpretation wasn't sophisticated in an adult sense, but it was genuine in a way that transcended technical considerations. The final notes of the song faded into complete silence, followed by enthusiastic applause that seemed to surprise Emma with its intensity. She offered her customary curtsy, gathered her guitar, and walked off stage with the same purposeful composure she had shown upon entering. "That was beautiful, sweetheart," Rebecca said, as Emma rejoined her in the wings. "You performed that song exactly the way we practiced, but you also made it uniquely yours." Emma beamed with satisfaction, the kind of joy that comes from knowing you've done your absolute best, regardless of the outcome. The competition aspect had become secondary to the personal achievement of successfully performing for a large, unfamiliar audience. The results ceremony took place 2 hours later, after all competitors had performed and the judges had completed their deliberations. Emma sat with her family in the auditorium, no longer nervous about the outcome, but curious about how her performance had been received. Third place in the traditional country division, ages 8 to 12, announced the MC, goes to Madison Foster from Las Vegas, Nevada. Polite applause filled the auditorium as a 12-year-old girl walked onto the stage to accept her bronze medal and small trophy. Second place in the traditional country division, ages 8 to 12, goes to Tyler Chen from San Francisco, California. Emma clapped enthusiastically for Tyler, a 10-year-old boy who had performed a Johnny Cash song with impressive style and confidence, and first place in the traditional Chakreech country division, ages 8 to 12. The MC paused for effect. Goes to Emma Rose Patterson from Bakersfield, California. The announcement hit Emma like a wave of surprise and joy. She had hoped to place well, but winning her division exceeded her most optimistic expectations. As she walked onto the stage to accept her gold medal and trophy, the applause seemed to follow her like a warm embrace. "Emma," said the lead judge as she presented the award, "your performance was remarkable not just for its technical quality, but for its emotional honesty. You have a very special gift." Emma accepted the trophy, a crystal music note mounted on a wooden base, with the same grace she had shown throughout the competition. But her biggest smile was reserved for the moment she spotted her family in the audience, all of them on their feet and applauding with tears in their eyes. The drive back to Bakersfield was filled with celebration and reflection on what the competition had meant for Emma's development as a performer. The trophy sat in Emma's lap, catching the afternoon sunlight as they traveled through the Central Valley. But the real prize was the confidence she had gained from successfully meeting a significant challenge. "I'm proud of you no matter what place you got," Sarah said, catching Emma's eyes in the rearview mirror. "But I'm especially proud of how you handled yourself today. You were professional and gracious, and completely yourself." "Rebecca was right," Emma replied thoughtfully. "It felt good to sing for people who didn't know me. They had to decide if they liked my singing just by listening, not because they already knew my story." That evening, the Patterson family gathered for a celebration dinner at Emma's favorite restaurant, a local family establishment that had been serving the community for 30 years. The trophy sat in a place of honor at the center of their table, but the conversation focused on Emma's future plans and the doors that were beginning to open for her musical career. "Rebecca thinks I should enter more competitions," Emma reported between bites of her favorite chicken and dumplings. "She says I need to get used to performing for different kinds of audiences." Frank nodded approvingly. "Competition is good for musicians. It keeps you sharp and helps you understand what you're capable of achieving." The mention of future opportunities brought the conversation around to the Nashville summer program that Garth Brooks had proposed. With Emma's competition success providing evidence of her readiness for more advanced challenges, the family felt more confident about considering the intensive program. "I think we should plan that visit to Nashville in the spring," Sarah said, voicing what they had all been thinking. If Emma continues to progress at this rate, the summer program might be exactly what she needs. Emma's eyes lit up with excitement. "Could we really go to Nashville? Could I see where all the famous country singers record their music?" "We'll see," Dorothy said with a smile. "But first, let's focus on continuing your lessons with Rebecca, and maybe finding a few more local performance opportunities." Over the following weeks, word of Emma's competition victories spread through Bakersfield's music community, leading to invitations to perform at various local events. She sang at a fundraiser for the Community Music Center, performed the national anthem at a high school football game, and was invited to participate in the annual Christmas concert at the historic Fox Theater. Each performance built her confidence and refined her skills, while also raising her profile as one of the region's most promising young talents. Local newspapers began featuring articles about her musical journey, and a regional television station produced a short documentary about her story that aired during their holiday programming. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came in the form of a surprise phone call on a quiet Tuesday evening in December. Emma answered the phone in the kitchen while helping Dorothy prepare dinner, expecting to hear from one of her school friends. "Hi, Emma. This is Garth." Emma nearly dropped the phone, her eyes growing wide as she recognized the familiar voice. "Mr. Garth, it's really you?" "I heard about your competition win," Brooks said, his voice warm with pride. "Congratulations, Emma. I knew you had something special, but winning your first major competition is a real achievement." Emma's excitement bubbled over as she recounted the details of the competition, describing her performance, the other competitors, and the feeling of winning her division. Brooks listened with the patient attention of someone who genuinely cared about her experiences and growth. "I have some news that I think you'll like," Brooks said when Emma finished her enthusiastic report. "I'm going to be performing a concert in Fresno next month, and I'd like to invite you and your family to be my guests. But more than that, I'd like you to join me on stage for one song." The offer left Emma speechless for several seconds, her mind struggling to process the magnitude of what Brooks was proposing. "You want me to sing with you? On stage? In front of all those people?" "I think you're ready for it," Brooks replied. "You've proven that you can handle pressure and deliver a great performance. This would be your chance to experience what it's like to perform for a really big audience." Emma's family gathered around as she excitedly shared Brooks's invitation, their faces reflecting the same mixture of amazement and pride that had become familiar since their lives had been transformed by that chance encounter at Miller's Market. As they discussed the opportunity over dinner, Emma found herself thinking about her father and the dreams he had nurtured for her musical future. The 8-year-old girl who had once sung in supermarket aisles was being invited to share the stage with one of country music's biggest stars. "Daddy would be so proud," Emma said quietly, voicing what everyone around the table was thinking. "He is proud," Frank replied with conviction. "Wherever he is, he's watching you grow into the musician he always knew you could become." The conversation continued late into the evening, with plans being made for the Fresno concert and discussions about the broader trajectory of Emma's musical education. The Nashville summer program no longer seemed like a distant dream, but rather a logical next step in a journey that was unfolding with remarkable momentum. As Emma practiced her guitar before bed that night, she found herself humming the dance and thinking about the meaning of the lyrics she had been singing for months. She was beginning to understand that her father's death, as painful as it had been, had also led to the musical opportunities that were shaping her future. "I could have missed the pain, but I'd have had to miss the dance," she sang softly to herself, finally beginning to grasp the profound truth contained in those words. Outside her bedroom window, the stars were beginning to appear in the clear December sky, the same stars that had witnessed her family's struggles and triumphs, their love and loss, and the remarkable journey that had transformed a grieving family's life through the power of music and the kindness of a stranger who had become a friend. Emma's story was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But the foundation had been laid, built on talent, hard work, family support, and the understanding that sometimes the most beautiful things in life emerge from the deepest challenges. As she drifted off to sleep, her guitar resting safely in its case beside her bed, Emma Rose Patterson was already dreaming of the stages she would grace and the songs she would sing, carrying her father's legacy forward while writing her own chapter in the great American story of music, dreams, and the courage to pursue them. The little girl who had once captivated a supermarket with her voice was ready to share her gift with the world. One song at a time, one dream at a time, one dance at a time.